Hi guys, Amy here. I just wanted to check in midweek with our week 8 discussion. As you can probably tell, I am a little under the weather, so I am going to try to keep this short and sweet. I know that this week's discussion wasn't the most complicated, but you guys have already come up with some really good ideas, so I do appreciate that. I wanted to pull out some of the good things that I saw in your original posts first. So some really good ideas coming up here. One of you remarked, in the plagiarized paragraph, the author may have been better having used quotation marks and maintaining the original of the few words that were changed. It is hardly paraphrased because the author did nothing to bring out his/her individual voice in stating the idea. When one sets out to paraphrase, they want to restructure the sentence and use his/her more natural language or language suited to the flow of the text. This author merely changed a couple of words. And so I thought there were really good ideas in pretty much every single sentence here. So first of all, if you are going to use quotation marks, you have to maintain the original. You have to quote the original word for word if you're going to put quotation marks around it. So this is wrong, not just because the part that was supposed to be paraphrased wasn't different enough. It's also wrong because if you had put quotation marks around it, it still wouldn't be exactly the original. So it's really not one or the other. It's kind of wrong in both ways. And then here they also say the author did nothing to bring out his/her individual voice, and when you're set out to paraphrase, you want to restructure the sentence and use more natural language or language suited to the flow of the text. So this was a really good point. A lot of you did recognize that the vocabulary needed to be changed, but also remember that when paraphrasing, you need to change the entire structure of the sentence and put it in your own voice, like this person says. Otherwise, you're going to be guilty of patch writing. Okay, down here, I thought this person had some good ideas as well. The writer of the acceptable passage paraphrased the original text. They summarized all the information in their own words. They were not worried about keeping the structure of the original text or even keeping it the same number of words. They simply interpreted the text and wrote what they learned from it. You can distinctly tell the difference between the two writers' ideas when you look at the original and the acceptable together. However, if you look at the original and the plagiarized text together, it's like you're reading the exact same sentence. So I really liked this one because it talked about what the acceptable passage did right, not just what the plagiarized passage did wrong. So a couple of things here. It's all in their own words. They don't keep the same structure. It's not the same number of words. This is a good observation because oftentimes, as we've seen earlier in the semester, that's one of the benefits of paraphrasing, right? Is that it kind of condenses it in a way and you can actually make it shorter. And then here too, you can distinctly tell the difference between the two writers when you look at the original and the acceptable together, but if you look at the plagiarized version and the original, it's like the exact same sentence. This was an idea that several of you brought up, that you need to be able to tell the difference between the voice of the original writer and the person who's doing the quoting or paraphrasing. And so that is, yes, a very true observation, and I was glad that several of you picked up on that. And then this one down here, again, just speaks to the advantages of paraphrasing. As an advantage of paraphrasing, the details or specifics can be left out. This writer could have said in the late 1800s or something of that nature rather than using the exact dates. And so keep this in mind as you start to quote and paraphrase working evidence into your own arguments. Because when you're paraphrasing, you may want to maintain authority of your own over your own writing by keeping it all in your own voice, okay? You can also kind of generalize about the information. You don't have to be so specific like this writer is saying. And so not only does that make it shorter, but it just helps synthesize those ideas into your own argument more smoothly. You don't always have to provide all the specific information like this. So I thought that was a really good observation along with the rest of these. A couple other things I just want to point out about plagiarism and incorporating information from your sources into your own arguments. Again, I'll just emphasize that if you do quote something, it has to be word for word. So make sure that you are being meticulous when you're taking notes or copying things down from your sources. If you're going to quote it, it has to be word for word. So you need to know what's a quote and what's a paraphrase and the distinction between the two in your own notes. Also remember that when you're paraphrasing, you have to change the sentence structure as well as the vocabulary, just like many of you have suggested. And also in general, just try to think about, I know a lot of you brought up accuracy to the original. When you are paraphrasing, you do want to make sure that you maintain accuracy to the original so that you aren't distorting it in any way as you put it in your own words. And then several of your comments that have already been posted this week kind of speak to that. I know not all of you have your comments done because those aren't due until tonight, but I wanted to pull out some good examples of those as well. This person says, I do agree with you. Changing a couple things around does not mean that you're not copying. You have to put things in your own words, almost like how you receive the text in your own head and not others. So this speaks to what I just said, but I especially like this second half of the statement here, because when I think about paraphrase, to me, it's like taking the idea that I read in that person's writing, putting it in my own head, mixing it up in there, blending it with my own original thinking, and then spitting it back out. But you still have to cite it, even when it's been blended with your own original thinking. But it's going to come out in a totally different shape and form than it went into your head if you are truly paraphrasing. And then again, if you're quoting, it has to be exactly word for word from the original. Okay, this person says, paraphrasing takes considerable more effort, but relays to the reader that the author understands the topic at hand. That said, I do think that quoting has many benefits to the world of writing, especially when writing an argument paper. So this is really relevant to the assignment we're working on right now. Trying to persuade an audience based on paraphrasing would be a difficult sell, as it is based on the author's word and or opinion. Using quotes gives the readers legitimate resources to explore on their own and substantiate the argument that the author is making. Do you think that one technique is more or less successful based on the genre of the paper being written? Good question there at the end. And so, as I said, I like the connection to the assignment we're working on right now, but this is a really good point about when quoting can be beneficial. I know we've talked a lot about why paraphrasing is usually the preferred method. But there are times when you would want to quote rather than paraphrase, and particularly in an argument when you're trying to lend authority to your sources, like this person says, it can sometimes be better to quote. This person says it would be a difficult sell to paraphrase if you've already blended it with your own words and opinions. And also it can just make you feel a little bit more credible when you show, like, I am representing this person's ideas honestly. So, when you're writing your arguments, you'll have to mediate between those two things and decide, is this a place where I want to show that I'm being really true to the original and quote? Or is this a place where I want my own voice and my own ideas to dominate the discussion and therefore paraphrase? So just keep that in mind moving forward as you begin drafting your essays. I thought those were some really good ideas here. And then this comment kind of speaks to what I was saying before about taking notes. I can see where it can become confusing to paraphrase and wind up just swapping words in the order of words. I always worry about this when I'm looking through sources, jotting down notes, especially when I start writing. So for me personally, I'm going to have to come up with a better way to distinguish my comments and thoughts from the quotes I've collected. Yes, you are all going to have to come up with a better way to distinguish your comments and thoughts or your paraphrase even from quotes. And when you're writing down quotes, you have to copy them word for word. And when you write down paraphrase, you have to change it entirely and find some way to indicate to yourself, and as this person says, distinguish for yourself one from the other. So please, please be doing that. It's going to be really difficult as you start to compile all of your sources, which I'm sure you are already doing as you're researching, that you are going to see that a lot of the information is going to bleed through from one to the other, also with your own ideas, and so you have to be really meticulous in keeping track of what things came from where, and then ultimately in your in-text citations you're going to have to do parenthetical citations with the page numbers in there, so you have to go down to the level of making sure you keep track of what page some of that information came from. So just make sure you're being really meticulous as you take your notes. Okay, I wanted to point out a couple other things. I planted some seeds in the discussion already this week and put some comments on several of the threads throughout here, as you can see. I wanted to highlight a couple of those and just give you something to think about as you complete your comments and reflections at the end of this week. So one of those was on Ashley's post, and I said, "Hi Ashley, it's interesting that you say that the plagiarized passage looks more like a quote to you," because that's what she said up here. I see what you mean, but it isn't a quote exactly and why. What is different about this, and why would it be wrong to just put quotation marks around what is written here? I'm interested to hear what you and your classmates think. So this was a question for Ashley, but I also want you guys, everyone in the class, to be considering this as you comment. Why isn't it okay to just put quotes around what the plagiarized passage says there? So maybe reflect on that in some of your comments and your final end of week reflections. And then another one was on Chelsea's original post down here. Let's see, toward the beginning of the week. And I said to Chelsea, you know, I like what you say about what the writer of the acceptable passage does right, not just what the writer of the plagiarized passage does wrong. I pulled that out earlier. Specifically, I thought what you said about the writer of the acceptable passage simply interpreting the text and writing what they learned from it, I think is absolutely correct. That true paraphrase involves some element of interpretation as you work to put it in your own words. I like to think about this as mixing it up inside your own head. I said that before. I wonder, though, how do you think writers can do this and still remain accurate to the original? How do you as a writer negotiate this challenge? So I mentioned this earlier as well. I just want you guys to think about this. You know, when you're paraphrasing, you are putting it in your own words. You are blending it in some ways with your own original thinking, as I've said. And so how do you do that and still remain accurate to the original? So that is just kind of a further prompt. As you're commenting and reflecting, just try to think about that. And then also finally, in your reflections for this weekend, please do wait until after midnight tonight to do your reflections, because you might still get some comments from the late posters, and I would want you to be able to take into account all the comments you received in your reflections. And then don't forget to post your reflections within your own thread. So, like if I was Ashley, I would go to my discussion 8 thread and click reply to post my reflections. So instead of separating those out and starting a new thread for your reflections, please do post those just within your own original thread. And that way it can be more closely connected to all of the comments you received and your original post. Okay, so I think that does it for now. That's pretty much most of what I saw being repeated in everyone's post. And so, like I said, even though this wasn't the most complicated assignment, I think you guys did pull out some really good ideas. Please keep up the good work as you complete your assignments for the rest of this week. And look forward to starting drafting your essays. You should be wrapping up your research at this point. So please email me if you do have any questions. Thank you.